All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Mid-Pointe. I'm Andrew Ernst, and you guys probably have seen me up here before, but today I get to be joined by my lovely wife.
I'd rather be.
It's funny because Jill's like been beating down Don's door saying, I want to get up there, I want to get up
Oh
there.
yeah.
And she's like, he's like, it's not your time yet, it's not your time, but your time will come. And then a few
Super
weeks
Bowl
ago,
Sunday.
right, a few weeks ago, he said, it's your time. And she barely slept last night because she's so excited. Let's open up in prayer. Father God, we come before you this morning, and we just thank you for the opportunity to get together. We thank you for our spouses. We thank you for the blessing of marriage. We ask that you would bless the conversation that we have this morning, that it might be glorifying to you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right. So we have talked, obviously, these first few slides are going to be very familiar to you. This is week number 5? 6. Week number 6 now. And so far in this study, we've talked about the nature of marriage, what it's all about. We talked about the purpose of marriage, which is to glorify God. Somebody's been listening and taking notes. I like it. To glorify God. That is the ultimate reason that He has put marriage, or has given us the gift of marriage, is to glorify God. I think if we can keep that at the forefronts of our minds when we're interacting with our spouses, that solves a lot of the fall and winter problems that we have talked about. Spring, excitement, optimism, joy, anticipation. Summer, contentment and satisfaction. Last week we talked a little bit about fall, the uncertainty and the apprehensiveness. And then winter, obviously, is where we all would like to avoid the disappointment, the frustration, the bitterness, the coldness towards one another. So with that being said, we wanted to talk a little, with Ron and Karen last week kind of introduced themselves.
No, Ron and Karen
Not
are
Ron
our
and
neighbors.
Karen, our neighbors. Ron and Dana. Ron and Karen are our neighbors. Yes. Keeping me on point. But Ron and Dana, we thought that it was really cool. Like, we knew who they were, but then they kind of explained a little bit about their relationship and how it kind of evolved and where they started. And so we wanted to do a little bit of that. I'll pass it off to Jill.
Oh, okay. So we've been married for just over 10 years, and what was interesting is we knew each other for several years and didn't bat an eye. And then Andrew moved to China.
Yeah.
And came home for winter break, and we decided, I'm like, oh, how are things going? Let's meet up for a drink. Then we started dating, and he went back to China for another year and a half, and then he moved home, and we got married a couple months later. So outside of summer, we probably spent about 6 or 8 weeks together, in
flesh.
person.
Right.
Otherwise, I think from the whole time we were dating, I don't know if we missed a single day on Skype.
Yeah.
So it was, early on, it was just communication was a priority. That was all we had, like, let's be honest. So we would talk on our way to work or on the way home. There wasn't a lot of social media stuff. He lived in China, so he couldn't really be on there. So that was an interesting way to start. I think we maybe, our spring season, when you're dating and it's exciting, our spring season was very different because it was like, in 8 weeks, I'm going to see you for 4 days. Like,
Yes.
This is going to be awesome.
Yeah, so we were baller status on American by the time we got married, which was cool because we made so many round trips back and forth from China. So I would come home every fall break, winter break, Chinese New Year, which we all celebrate here greatly too. We get a week off school over there at least, and then spring break she would typically come. But I would have told the story a little bit different. But no, I'm kidding. That was definitely the nuts and bolts. But my best friend and roommate married her sister, and so that's actually how we met. But we were always dating somebody else. And then it took me moving to China for her to be like, hey, I like that. That guy's kind of cool. But yes, we didn't miss a day on Skype from the day after Thanksgiving until 18 months later. And I mean, for sure, like making it a priority was huge, and we dated every day. It was just over a computer screen, and so the communication part, I think what we were able to establish communication-wise was amazing. She'll be able to tell you, we made like 10,000 lists. We have a bucket list, and we have a list of requirements of a spouse, and that was before we got married, and there was all kinds of different conversations that got to come up, which was good, because I still think, a couple of weeks ago I said, it was like the night before we came here one week where we played this game, I forget what it's called, but it's basically just a bunch of questions. I would encourage you to get that game. It would help if I knew what it was called. You got it for me. What's it called?
I don't. It's in a red box.
It is in a red box.
It has cards.
But it's cool. It's just a bunch of questions now. What's the best gift you ever gave me? What's the this? What's the that? And that was kind of like what Skype was about, because I would go in with like a list of questions, because after 15 minutes or something, there were times where you would run out of things to say, and I didn't want that to happen. This was always on my free period. I had like a third period free while I was teaching throughout the day, so that was 9 a.m. and it was her 8 p.m. and it was fun. But
it was fun on the weekends too. If he would he would wanna stay up or something to like watch NCAA finals. It like goes on in the evening, right? So I'm having a glass of wine and
I'm having a cup of coffee.
And that was our date, We have on Skype and chat, and
yeah, for
great.
sure.
So,
but afterwards too, I think it definitely brought spring very early for us, and an extended version of it, because of the fact that we knew what we didn't have when we were there. Like there was just this. It was difficult being apart, and like she said, there was times where it was 8 weeks, and there was just like, oh. So once we got to be in like together with each other, we didn't take it for granted for a long time, and so that was really beneficial for us. And like everybody else, we have our peaks and valleys, as we've talked about, and we've definitely, traversed our way through these seasons, especially with kids being around. But yeah, that's kind of our story.
I'm gonna do two quick things. First of all, we brought a prop, so that was exciting. But in taking it off the wall this morning, I found this. This was something that it was either first or second year.
Yeah, I missed an 8-year-old Valentine.
Valentine. I had Valentines all around our house. Found it this morning. And then second of all, we just thought this would be fun, given it's marriage talk. We brought our wedding vows. So we did write our own vows. That was just something we wanted to do. I'm going to put them over here. But what's funny about it is they are right outside of our bathroom. So every time you come out of the bathroom, you can read the wedding vows and just remind yourself intention and
yeah, for sure.
What this is all about.
It's good reminders. During teeth brushing, a lot of the time you look at that and it's a good reminder. So for sure. Okay, so what is the point of this study that we're doing? It is fun because we were joking, I'm not going to talk about any quarks today, nor strong force or weak force, or the difference in gravitational pull of different planets, etc. I have enjoyed this study a ton because of the fact that it's so A, approachable, B, practical for all of us, and C, the fact that it's been really interesting to hear different perspectives from different times in people's marriages, and I think everyone is willing to share, which is awesome, because we're all in this journey. So what is the point of the study? I had one up there already to think. What else? Like why sometimes we very much like dive in to this, and I'm not saying we haven't. We've still talked about the Bible and Christ for sure, but this is definitely a different study. So why did Don choose this one?
The neat thing is just the age differences, so kind of having mentorship there of when you share and discuss and what worked and what didn't. I think it's, that camaraderie out here that helps. For sure. Yeah, I mean, it's almost like I don't want to say a counseling session, but it's almost like a group counseling session that you can be in with people that you trust and that you can be open with. I've enjoyed that. I think to be reminded of God's purpose for our marriage, to glorify Him,
If you can keep that in mind on the day in, day out, I think that solves a ton of your fall and winter problems. To learn more about the dynamics of your relationship, Dave kind of alluded to the fact that when he said, I don't know what season we're in, I don't think this is an exact science. I don't think God designs the fall, spring, winter, and summer seasons of marriage. But I do think it definitely provides a good way for you and your spouse to talk about it and think about it. I think that reading this book every 5-ish years would be something super healthy for your relationship because of how things ebb and flow dynamic-wise. And then the last thing that I thought about, and this is what we're diving into today, is to discuss and discover strategies to enhance your communication, your relationship, and your marriage as a whole. And so this is what we're going to be doing for the next 2 weeks. Next week, Missy will grab the reins and talk about some of the strategies that we're not going to hit today. So Chapman outlines 7 strategies to enhance the seasons of your marriage. Choose a winning attitude. Discover the joy of helping your spouse succeed. Maximizing your differences. Implementing the power of positive influence. Learning to speak your spouse's love language. Develop the power of empathetic listening. And deal with past failure. We're going to touch on the yellow ones today. And then Missy's going to grab a hold of those bottom 3 next week. So getting right into it. So the first of his strategies is to choose a winning attitude. The most common mistake, direct quote from him in the book, couples make is allowing negative emotions to dictate their behavior. By failing to recognize the power of a positive attitude, we miss out on our marriage's highest potential. I think that, if you think about this, we can probably all relate. Being Super Bowl Sunday, we had to toss in an athlete quote here. Most athletes agree that success is 90% mental and 10% physical. The same can be said of relationships. What are some examples that illustrate this past statement? That success in your relationship is 90% mental and 10% physical? I don't know. Well, you know what I'm saying. A good portion of it is about your attitude. Try to think on that. What are some examples? Do you guys have any examples where the exact same thing happens, but then attitude, where you are in your frame of mind on that particular day will change things?
All right, go back to your shoe example.
My shoe example?
Say you walk across the floor with your shoes on, get the
the shoes in the house.
Jill's mad, yep.
Yes.
She could choose to say, wow, he's got a lot on his mind. He must have, I believe the best in him, so it must have slipped his mind this one time. Or she could look and go, man, I can't believe that you left your shoes on purpose, wants me to clean it.
Yeah, for sure. That's a good
Not
one.
that we've ever had anything like that. But.
I was thinking, there's so many. I was thinking about, so we live on 3/4 of an acre, and I typically am the one who mows the lawn. Mike is starting to get there, but just misses too many spots at this point. If I go out, it takes about an hour. I usually throw headphones on. I'm sitting on a riding mower, and I finish, and hopefully I did a good job. But Jill could have the choice of either saying, hey, sarcastically, how was your hour-long break? Listening to the radio from the kids. Or it could be, thank you for doing that. The lawn looks great. And I think that, I'm confident that actually has, both of those have said yes.
Yeah. Must be nice.
Right, exactly. But those are, I think going in with attitude, our mind is such a powerful thing. And really, one of the things that Chapman highlights, and he spends more on choose a winning attitude than any of these other strategies in this book. I think it's about twice as many pages as any of the other strategies. Don.
April has something.
I was just thinking, maybe not from the same perspective as we're talking about, but thinking about like if you're falling into those fall and winter months, looking at it with a positive attitude of we're going to work together to get through this and we will get through it versus sticking with the negative.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, no, and that goes back to the communication part, absolutely.
And the book talks about it with a couple of these too, of like, even if your spouse is not totally on board or they're not like, they're so checked out, disengaged, resentful, like you can change your attitude, and it's not to manipulate, but eventually there's a good chance your spouse will also change their attitude because of that grace you're giving and your positive attitude. So, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, he says that a lot. You can't change your spouse, but you can change yourself and your attitude. And then he effectively says, in the domino effect, will likely push them, that kill them with kindness, show them that much grace. And like, because we have sin in the world, it's not about the things that happen to you. Unfortunately, the biggest example that they gave in this was one that we can't necessarily relate to, but I think it's worth mentioning. He talked about two different couples that he met with. Both of them had like the worst tragedy that could possibly happen to you, which would probably be, if you have children, one of them dying. And both couples sought him out for counseling. Within a couple weeks of that happening, one set of husband and wife immediately started playing the blame game. He would not have gotten hit by the car if you this, if you that. If we didn't live here, I wanted to move 2 years ago. This wouldn't have happened, etc. And the other couple whose son drowned in a pool did not play that blame game. Did not, blame it on each other. And obviously, you can you likely know which couple ended up staying together and which didn't. Now, that's not. Hopefully not relatable at all for any of us in the near future or hasn't been in the past. But the point is that, bad things are going to happen, and it's not about what happens to us, but how we interpret it as to the difference between success and failure. So, when attitude strikes, what are some strategies that you as an individual or you as a couple use to combat it? What are some strategies?
Andrew, I think one of the, excuse you may speak on this next week, is something that I learned a long time ago in my early Christian walk was expectations. And I've joked with David and Julie for years that I'm going to write a book called Unmet Expectations, which the vast majority of our conflict comes from unrealistic expectations. So, or realistic expectations don't get met. So I've realized one of the things I've had to do, and I talked with my sister and my brother quite often about this, the challenge is adjusting your expectations to that which is realistic for your spouse. And so I know early on with Julie and I, and any conflict that we had early in our marriage, it was we didn't have realistic expectations about what marriage was. So, and maybe Missy, I didn't even know if you were going to be talking about that at all next week, but.
It was not.
Okay.
I'll add it now. I think, and we're going to actually talk about this. This is one of the pieces that he outlined specifically, but I think the hardest part about the attitude thing is when, Ron and Dana talked about this last week with one of their kids that just, when they explode, it changes everybody's attitude. And you guys have all been there. You know how that goes, where like a stubbed toe is just, whatever, when you are, if it's a good day and everything's going fine, it's like no big deal. But when you're in the thick of it and you're in the weeds, that's like, and you just blow up. And so, I don't know. I mean, obviously laughter is a big thing that can help it, but it's so much harder to laugh when you're in that attitude problem. So let's listen to the expert then. If we don't have strategies, maybe we'll come about one. One of the big things that he highlights is having a Christian worldview. And that is ultimately, even when you're experiencing the enormous stressors and the catastrophic events, That's the easiest way to keep a positive attitude. So what does that Christian worldview entail? Well, obviously, it's having Christ at the center of your marriage. But he outlines 5 specific things. Number 1, every human being is made in the image of God and is therefore extremely valuable, including your spouse. Number 2, each person is uniquely gifted by God, including the mentally and physically challenged. That last part, I don't know, that could come into play as we age. Number 3, each person has a unique role to play in life. Number 4, a marriage is God's idea. Husbands and wives are intended to complement one another. And then number 5, the object of marriage is to glorify God by serving one spouse and helping your spouse reach his or her God-given potential. I think, having, if you went in and you remembered these 5 things every day, I don't think the attitude is ever really going to stick. You might still have the ups and the downs, but if we can go in with that as our particular kind of foundation, I think that we'd be pretty solid. All right. Going on, choosing a winning attitude. So this was really the question that we asked last time of breaking that cycle of negativity. So when we do get into the just in the weeds over and over and over again, he outlines a strategy too for breaking that cycle of negativity. And I think number 1 is so enormously important. Acknowledge your negative thinking about your spouse and don't excuse or rationalize it. So even when, he uses a bunch of examples about couples that are in the weeds, and they have both had issues, but this goes back to kind of what Jill was talking about, the give them grace, kill them with kindness. It's not okay, even if you've been wronged, to carry that negative attitude and continue pointing the finger. Because as soon as you rationalize it, it makes you think it's okay, and it pits you against each other as opposed to working together, like April was talking about, and being on that same team. Number 2, identify your spouse's positive characteristics. A lot of this was for couples that were in the winter season where they were literally roommates living together and just communicating about logistics. But identify your positive characteristics and focus on those positive traits and thank God for them. Number 4, pray. That's a big one. And then number 5, I think is also a very big one. Express your appreciation verbally to your spouse. And we all have our love languages. Some of us are, what's the verbal one? Words of affirmation. And if your spouse's words of affirmation, I think number 5 couldn't be any bigger. But I think that this is definitely a strategy that you can use when you're in that negative piece. Thank you for making dinner. It's delicious. Thank you for unloading the dishwasher. Thank you for getting the kids dressed. Thank you for, brushing their hair. Thank you for, that simple 2-word phrase is just, at times you can feel it take stress off, both as the person that says it and then, as the person that receives it, obviously. It's a good thing. Any thoughts, comments on breaking the cycle of negativity? Yes.
I just want to say something about the thank you thing. Something that Craig does, and it just means a lot to me. We have a dry erase board. He works nights, so he leaves in the middle of the night, and so I don't see him till the next morning. A lot of times he'll leave me a note that'll say, "Thank you for making dinner last night. It was really good." And okay, it was grilled cheese and tomato soup, but I made dinner last night, and he liked it, and he said thank you.
I didn't have to.
But it does go a long way. Definitely does.
For sure.
A strategy that I was told at some point, I don't know if it was a book or whatever, but if you're, something you can do to break the negativity is when you're not angry at your spouse, write, 20, 30, 40, 50 things that you love about your spouse write it down and have it in a drawer somewhere. And when you guys get in an argument and it's getting heated, you can say, okay, I'm gonna take a break, we need to take a break, and go and
Read that list.
and it can bring you back to a place of remembering what you love about your spouse as opposed to what you're angry about, and kind of, then you can come back and have a more constructive conversation.
Yeah.
I would just kind of add to that, I think I remind myself towards this two things. One, the things that frustrate me about my husband were there from day one, right? I chose you knowing all of this. And then two, very quickly, I followed up with, do you think he doesn't have those same things? You know, just to humble yourself of, we are two back to that piece, that we are two unique people made by God, and so he's got his frustrations with me too, but he chose me, so it's stuck with me. But it kind of helps.
For
Think
sure.
about, like, when you're dating, some of those things that, like, really could go either way. And you know, you're in your spring season, and it's like, oh, Andrew loves sports. Like, I like sports. This is cool. This is great. And then it's like, he loves sports and watches football for 8 hours.
I do not.
Like, no, he does not. But you know, it could totally go either way. And then you have to remind yourself, like, I knew this
3-hour game.
about this person before we got married, and like, it didn't bother me then. Why should it bother me now? Like, and
I do fold laundry.
Well, can I say one thing too, and it is the, going into marriage, you're supposed to complement each other, but your spouse cannot do for you what God is supposed to do for you. And so if you're, that, I mean, I've opened up, if anybody's interested in really learning about your marriage, 1 Corinthians really addresses it, especially chapter 7 and other parts. That's where God, through the Holy Spirit, God the Holy Spirit through Paul, writes down some of the best instructions is 1 Corinthians, because there was such corruption in the church, and he wanted to get. And coming into your marriage, thinking that Julie was going to be able to do all these things for me that only God could do, and until I was connected to God, that all start to actually connect and complement one another. So just a reminder that your spouse cannot be God in your life; only God can fill that. So.
Yeah.
And one last thing with Dan, we brought this up a long time ago, but kind of the need versus the want. I need God, I want my spouse, and that helps you figure out who's doing what there.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, I think that a lot of these strategies are difficult if the absence of the trio is not there, you know. Okay, so we're trying to get to 4 strategies today, and we just spent 20 minutes on that one. So number 2, discover the joy of helping your spouse succeed, is his second primary strategy. A successful husband/wife is one who expends their energy helping their spouse to reach their potential for God and for doing good in the world. Okay? So how do we do that? Model Christ. That's the biggest advice he gives. Model Christ. He was not manipulative at all or self-serving. He led by serving others. Okay? And so Don's going to read John chapter 10, 13, verses 1 through 17 real quick for us.
So if you grab the Bibles underneath your chairs, it's page 1079.
1079.
Okay, you want me to read it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Jesus washes his disciples' feet. Page 1079. It was just before the Passover festival. Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. The evening meal was in progress, and the devil had already prompted Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power, and that he had come from God and was returning to God. So he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, and wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. He came to Simon Peter, who had said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus replied, "You do not realize now what I am doing, but later you will understand." "No," said Peter, "you shall never wash my feet." Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you have no part with me." "Then, Lord," Simon Peter replied, not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well. Jesus answered, those who have had a bath need only to wash their feet. Their whole body is clean. And if you are clean, though not every one of you. For he knew who was going to betray him, and that was why he said not everyone was clean. When he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. Do you understand what I have done for you? He asked them. You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. Very truly I tell you, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them.
It's argued that other than obviously Jesus' self-sacrifice on the cross, that was the greatest act of service that he did for anyone. And you can tell how, like, we kind of think about it like wash feet, okay, not that big of a deal. But the way that Peter reacted, you could tell how big of a deal that was. And I'm sure that you've heard people comment on that. But Chapman, like, he goes on this about humbling yourself to serve your spouse. Would you wash your spouse's feet? Of course, we would all, I'm sure, wash our spouse's feet. But I want to read just a quick excerpt from the book. He says, and this is right after he talks about Jesus washing their feet. He said, true greatness is expressed through serving, not by seeking one's own agenda. This principle is true in marriage as well as all of life. A great husband is one who's willing to serve his wife. A great wife is one who's willing to serve her husband. If you want to breathe new life into a fall or winter marriage, start serving your spouse. Mow the grass, cook meals, clean the bathroom, vacuum floors, do the laundry, take care of the kids while your spouse goes to the gym, wash the car, trim the shrubs, help with a computer problem, or clean out the garage. Those are all examples of acts of service. It took me a long time to figure out that life's greatest meaning is found in giving and not getting. When I finally grasped this profound principle, it made a significant difference in my marriage. For me, the attitude of service required an acute change in my heart. We are all egocentrical, and my egocentric spirit had to be released, not to my wife, but to God. He said, and this is huge, I prayed a simple prayer, Lord, give me the attitude of Christ. I want to serve my wife as Jesus served his followers. As I look back on my 4 decades of marriage, I'm convinced that God answered that prayer, and it had the greatest impact on my marriage, or it had a greater impact on my marriage than any other prayer that I have ever prayed. And so the idea of humbling yourself to serve your spouse and others as well is one of the strategies that he uses. And then he kind of talks about it from a practicality standpoint. We go back to offer encouraging words, take supportive action, provide emotional support, and express respect for your spouse. I think that last one is huge, both when you're with them and when you're not with them. Expressing respect is a big piece. All right, so we want you to spend about 2 minutes with your spouse. Talk with them about how do I help you succeed, and is there something more that you could be doing? Go ahead and discuss real quick. All right. Does anybody care to share some of the ways that they help their spouse succeed? Taylor.
One of the things
you can always count on Taylor. Taylor, former student of mine. This is exactly how it was back in the day. If nobody wanted to talk, I'd just call on Taylor. She can talk.
I'll always talk. One of the things that we've done is like always encouraging the other person to keep growing, whether it's a hobby that I like or not. You know, if he's interested in it, I will say, hey, I will absolutely have the kids tonight. Why don't you go do this just to try it? Whether or not you're going to like it, who knows? But so that you keep growing and feel like we're never getting stagnant.
For sure, for sure. Jill keeps us organized. That's how she helps me succeed. She helps to keep me organized for sure. That's going to kind of lead into one of the next things that she's going to talk about here. But I also think like encouraging them to chase their dreams. Job changes and everything. I'm sure you relate on that. It's what is your heart telling you to do? Like pray about it. Continue to lead each other in that path with Christ. I think is huge. But encouraging, your spouse to chase their dreams. I think that's something that I've done to help Jill to have success. So, all right, next strategy.
All right, we're at 18 minutes. All right, so maximize your differences. This was like my favorite one in the whole book, just because I think it's so many couples, it's so very obvious, but those differences are often your irritations too. So it starts out with God is the author of diversity. He intended us to all be very different and for those differences to complement each other. Kind of goes back to, I just underlined it in another slide, hold on, let me find it. Under choose a winning attitude, yes, husband or wife are intended to complement each other, and how boring it would be if you were the exact same. I think a lot of times your differences are just because that's how you grew up. That's how you were raised, and so you were raised that way, so that's the way that's right for the most part. And then when you get married to somebody and all of a sudden you're on this even playing field, your differences can either bring you together or kind of tear you apart. And so the attitude is part of that, but all right, so real quick before that. So it says, you're different. Let's find out how. I'm going to read one little excerpt, and then we'll do a video or an activity. So it says, in God's plan, our differences were never intended to divide us. In fact, God is the author of diversity. No two snowflakes, fingerprints, or leaves on a tree are exactly alike. When God created mankind, he built into our genetic structure the potential for unlimited diversity. When he instituted marriage as a union of two unique individuals, he knew that he was creating unity out of diversity. Not only are we different people because we're male and female, we're different in every aspect of our life. So, what kind of graph would you call that, or diagram?
Well, that's just a T-chart.
Okay, T-chart. So if everybody could just draw a T-chart real quick. And if you want, put yours and your spouse's initials or whatever. You can do us or them, me or you. So we're going to do a quick activity. Andrew is going to do ours for everybody.
Yeah.
So, all right. So first of all, who is more, in your relationship, who is more organized?
In trouble if you answer wrong.
You can either do it together or you can each do it.
Yeah.
Hopefully you have the same answers. All right, who is more spontaneous? Who is more patient?
That is closer to the
Who is more likely to be late? We should have done the shoe thing, like at weddings.
Yes, that's what we're doing, just with the T-chart.
And last but not least, who is more likely to help a stranger in need?
Both are. So, and I think that, like, haha, funny, funny. But if you are the organized one, and we've struggled with this, I'm not, and Jill is, and she is 10 years down in, she got me trained, which is really good. So now I have the Google Calendar, and I use it, and it's good. But that has been a point of contention. There have been times where, it's just been, why can't you? And I don't know. I like that. It's just like my DNA. It's how I wasn't wired. And at this point in time, Jill has, relatively speaking, embraced that and kind of recognized. And it's not that I don't try anymore, but yeah, like play to your strengths and maximize the differences between the two. He highlights it with these 5 things, and Jill, you can go ahead.
All right. Well, I guess we'll go there. That's cool. So first, identify your differences. Second, look for assets in your differences. Learn from your differences. Replace condemnation with affirmation, which is huge. And discover a plan for maximizing your differences.
If you don't get all these down, you can go back to YouTube. Yeah, I'm zooming in on the screen. So there's lots of information.
So I want to read a quick part from the book that really complements this nicely. It says, similarly, in the institution of marriage, God intends for husbands and wives to bring their unique characteristics together to form one team that will work together under God's direction to accomplish his eternal purposes. God designed our differences to be assets, not liabilities. When we learn to maximize our differences for the benefit of the marriage, we align our lives with God's purpose. The Bible calls this marital unity. When each spouse recognizes and affirms each other's uniqueness, the differences themselves weld the couple to an unbeatable team. So I think we talk a lot, and maybe it's because of our kids' age and we like sports, but like we are a team. And I think we maybe mentioned this last week, but even when stuff is hard, like we are not enemies. We are a team. Our kids are not the enemies, right? Like we are a team. We and you can feel it like when we're kind of when we're doing different plays. Like I don't know what you would even call this. When you're running Utah and I'm running Minnesota and the defense is not working,
I understand. That took me a second.
He's a coach, not me. So, so like identify your differences. I think a lot of times it's what they highlight in the book are these are the things that really irritate you about your spouse. But then look for the assets and replace that condemnation, that poor attitude with affirmation and appreciation, and then discover a plan for maximizing it. So, like I do our taxes, and if Andrew wanted to do our taxes, that would be fine, but I would probably want to check them. So the plan is just he just doesn't do them, and you can't hold that over him. And he doesn't there's just so many things in that we're a lot different actually. It's okay. But there's just things that it's great being married to somebody who has different strengths than you because truthfully sometimes it's nice to not have to worry about some certain things.
I like your sport analogy because you think when you talk defense and offense, when you're a whole team, you need both of those to stay a team.
Yes.
For sure. All right, so what's an example of a difference in you and your spouse that enhances your marriage? What is an example of, Andrea?
I'm like the type A, stubborn, hard-headed, just all the bad adjectives you can have. I call it passion, but I guess by definition, which Chris had to actually look up, it's love and anger or something like that. And I'm like, whatever, man, I'm Italian. It's in my blood, So, but like he is like the Mr. Cool, calm, chill and whatnot, and like. You never realize when they say like marriage, like how, you grow with each other, you help each other and whatnot. And it's just like, I don't want to say like I'm showing him to be like more assertive or stuff, but like he can't make a Costco return without I'm like, how are you a cop? Just go do it. Just do it. No one cares, But then he's teaching me okay, chill, not everything needs to be, blown up and just a different perspective. And with, going back with the other thing about how your brain, your mind is so powerful.
Yes.
Like we were literally having this conversation last night that you can convince yourself that you're sick. And a lot of people, you know, like struggle with that or whatever, and like you're not, and it's just, you know, just your headspace, your mindset, and like he's just really big into that. And it's just like, well, if it were me, I'd be down that like path of just like crazy all the time. But like he is like, you know, I know it's cheesy, but the yin to the yang and whatnot. Like you balance each other and you help each other become better people because of that. Because like it's just, you're never going to change your spouse, you know, and that's like a huge thing that I think people have a hard time accepting, but you can help them become better versions of themselves, more or less.
Yep.
So God's whole purpose is about unification, right? To become one, but it's 1 + 1 actually equals 3. And that is really God's purpose, to sort of build upon the differences and create a greater strength through that unification.
I feel like you wanted to drive the knife in and turn it a little bit. Me being the math teacher, you would bring up 1 + 1 = 3.
I know that's the new man. If you're not familiar with it.
But yeah, no, for sure. It is big, and I think that, you know, like similar to you, like Jill's definitely more type A, and I think I bring a little bit of loosey-goosiness to the marriage, and you know, when the attitudes are not wonderful, sometimes that's not great. But I do think balancing it and not being afraid also to say that, you know, at times for, you know, hopefully says like, chill, come on, like, you know, and bring that fun and laughter and, you know, to use that to enhance your marriage and compliment is a big word.
We just, this week, the windshield wiper fluid needed more fluid in it. And I had said something to Dan, and I was like, can you just put it in there, right? And so we did an errand, and it wasn't working yet. And so I was like, hey, remember when we talked about this? And I said, I really need the windshield wiper. And so I thought I was really going at it. I was giving it a 5. I was doing the best I can, taking everything from these weeks. And he goes like, that was like a 3. Try squeezing it again, and the water actually came out. The solution actually came out. So then I had to sit there. It was in there, and I had to eat my words. But I was like, so I really tried to not blow up over something that was so small. And he was like, I give you a 3. And I'm like, 3's better than a 2. Like, you're really getting there. And he's like, but it's not. It's a fail. But it was just really, like, when you think about the attitudes or the differences, like, he did that while I was finishing up a work meeting that I didn't intend to take. Got both of the kids home from school, off the bus, and filled the windshield wiper fluid, but just didn't pump it enough for me to, like, expect it in the moment. So I was like, oh, got it. Okay, sorry.
Which, and I think that highlights also going back to one of the primary foundational pieces, which is that forgiveness. You know, and like the willingness to put your tail between your legs, and then in turn give that grace to that person, and that cycle that is consistent and constant and daily because of sin. You know, I think that's hugely important for sure.
And the whole point of maximizing our differences is a reflection of God. Once again, I mean, we're going to glorify God in our marriage. Well, our marriage is a picture of God, and so God within the Trinity is 3 persons, 1 essence. When you get married, it's 2 becoming 1 flesh. That's why God talks about it. So those differences that can annoy you are actually supposed to complement you, just as the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit complement. So everything we do in marriage, all these pointers are in some way a reflection of who God is.
For sure. Okay. Last strategy. We only got a couple minutes left. It actually, this one is, it goes along with the first one quite a bit. But implement the power of positive influence. We've talked about this. You cannot change your spouse, but you can, and whether or not you want to, you do influence your spouse every single day. And so if you can keep in mind that your attitude and your actions and your words, what's the verse? Our words have the power of, I don't remember, life or death somewhere in Proverbs. But like the words that we say, the way that we interact, how much we appreciate the love that we show to each other, the grace that we show to each other every day, that's the positive influence that he's referring to here. Choose that to be a positive impact. Positive choices lead to positive actions, which lead to positive results. And I can't, I don't think I can go through this slide without mentioning that like all of this is happening for those of us with kids, with our children watching. And regardless of what we're telling them, they're learning how to be a husband and wife, and they're learning how to interact with other people, and they're learning how to do all those things. I know. And so at times, right, I'm like, as I say that, going, oh, I shouldn't have said that a couple days ago. But our kids are following the example that we're going to be setting for them as we interact as husband and wife. What are you laughing at?
I'm just laughing at where Maya learned her antic.
Oh, got it. I see. So yes, the power of positive influence. Okay, so we have a couple of last discussion questions. I want to skip the first one because I just realized that I'd kind of be stepping on Mrs. toes there. I want to, I think, hone in on the second one if you wanted to answer the third. But how can we cultivate a habit of gratitude towards one another, especially during tougher times in our relationship? Or what are some small, consistent actions that we can take to show love and appreciation every day, even during the more challenging times? Does anybody have like habits that they, I like the whiteboard thing. It's simple, takes 30 seconds, but especially when one person wakes up without the other, I'm sure it's a nice way of, leaving a...
You're going to kick off the day.
Yeah, right. Good
and then I get a response back when I get home.
Yeah.
Sometimes good, sometimes really good. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
This isn't my story, but it's a friend's story. She said her husband would come home every day and set his cup on the counter, and it really bothered her. And then one day she just had the thought, maybe you know this story, like, what if that was Jesus's cup? I would clean it up. So then she would just start cleaning up for him, like serving him. So I kind of think of that stuff, like, okay, if I can pack his lunch, I'll just do it. Because if Jesus was here, I would certainly do it, just serving your spouse like you would Jesus.
Yeah, for sure. I think that, the second one of serving like Christ. So
that habit of gratitude, raising kids, I always learn 3 to 1. You can't criticize them or critique them until you've given them 3 compliments. Very important to spouses to look into the things that they do in that day to day or just overall before they give any kind of feedback.
3 to 1. Work on that. The kids are for sure. Okay, we're getting to be that time here. Thank you guys for participating and listening, and we got one more week of strategies next week. But if you guys would join closing in prayer. Father God, we thank you for this time together, for the discussion point. We ask that you would help us to remember to keep you at the top of our marriage, that it is a 3-part group, and we ask that you would help us to communicate well with our spouses, and that you would help us to ultimately glorify you in our relationship with one another. Thank you for forgiveness for those times that we inevitably